My name is Jessica Lawson, and for as long as I can remember, I believed that love was both the bedrock and the guiding light of my existence. I grew up with an unwavering faith that truth and loyalty were the only currencies that mattered in life. I had always envisioned a future filled with harmony and financial stability, a future I built piece by painstaking piece with Robert, the man I once called my soulmate. Our union, forged during the halcyon days of our college years on a crisp autumn campus in New England, blossomed into what many admired as the ideal marriage. We were young, full of hope, and ambitious enough to carve our own niche amidst the world's uncertainties. I recall the day of our wedding. The breeze carried whispers of promise, and as I walked down the aisle in a dress that shimmered like dawn, every heartbeat told me that our life together would be one painted with joy and prosperity. In those early years, our love was not only an emotional pact but also a financial one. Together, we managed our finances with a discipline that impressed even the most seasoned accountants. We diligently built a joint portfolio that, over time, amassed a sum of $2,500,000, a number that to many might seem astronomical, but for us was the tangible expression of every sacrifice, every late-night overtime shift, and every dreamed-of possibility. I remember poring over our bank statements on lazy Sunday mornings, marveling at how numbers on paper could represent the life we had painstakingly created. There was comfort in knowing that behind every deposit was the sweat of our efforts, and behind every withdrawal, a future vision slowly coming to life. Yet, life, as I would soon learn, is not always as linear or as predictable as we wish it to be. It is in the quiet spaces between our triumphs and our plans that seeds of doubt sometimes take root. Over time, I started noticing the first subtle signs, almost imperceptible aberrations that, in hindsight, pointed to a truth too painful to embrace. There were small discrepancies in our monthly statements, a transfer here, an unaccounted-for fee there. I recall the first time I saw a mysterious withdrawal of $50,000 marked as miscellaneous expense. At that moment, a chill crept over me, but I pushed it aside, attributing it to an administrative error or perhaps a miscommunication between our trusted financial institutions. I convinced myself that the larger picture was one of security, that these minor irregularities would eventually be explained away. After all, what harm could a small, seemingly incidental amount do compared to the fortress of dollars we had built together? Days turned into weeks, and as the months slid by almost imperceptibly, the cracks in our perfect edifice became ever so slight but undeniable. I would find myself awake at ungodly hours, the quiet of the night amplifying my inner turmoil. I began to notice that Robert's late-night phone calls and sudden absences were growing more frequent. The scent of expensive cologne, not mine but unmistakably foreign to our shared routines, began to linger over his belongings. Every time I glanced at our latest bank statement, I felt a prickle of unease, a whisper that something was terribly amiss within the stream of our precious millions. Barely daring to hope for a miracle to dispel my mounting fears, I embarked on a personal investigation, one born out of a desperate need for clarity rather than suspicion. Night after night, I meticulously cross-checked our accounts, scrutinized every transaction, and compared our statements with our planned budgets. What I discovered was a series of financial transactions so subtle that one might easily have dismissed them as mere oversights. But the truth was far darker than any mistake. In the span of just 1 year, a staggering total of $1,800,000 had mysteriously slipped away into accounts set up in clandestine names, accounts that I never even knew existed. It was as if our financial foundation had been eroded from the inside out, a silent and insidious betrayal that threatened to strip away not only my security but also my very sense of self. Each new piece of evidence I uncovered felt like a dagger to the heart, my trust, my memories, my shared dreams with Robert, all tarnished by the stark, unyielding truth of deceit. I remember the long hours I spent in the solitude of this very room, clutching printouts of bank statements, emails replete with coded language, and recordings of hushed conversations. The sound of the rain outside became a somber metronome, punctuating my thoughts as the bitter reality took hold. My mind, once so full of tender memories and promises of forever, now teetered on the brink of disbelief. I could no longer reconcile the man I loved with the meticulous schemer who had siphoned away nearly $2 million. In the depths of my despair, I found an unexpected source of strength, a solitary verse that resonated with the tumult in my soul. As I pored over my battered Bible, its worn pages a testament to countless nights spent seeking solace, I encountered the words of Psalm 46 verse 1, "God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble." Those words, simple yet profound, became a beacon in the darkness. They reminded me that even as the treachery threatened to consume every part of my being, I was not alone. I clung to that verse as a lifeline, a promise that amidst the storm of betrayal, there lay a refuge I could trust, a strength that would help me reclaim what had been stolen from me. It is strange how the most catastrophic events in our lives can also serve as catalysts for metamorphosis. The revelation of Robert's double life, a secret world where deceit was disguised as normalcy, and where my trust was exploited for a gain that had left me destitute in spirit if not in material means, was the turning point. As I sat in the quiet gloom of my study, surrounded by evidence of a broken trust, I made a choice. I could either allow this betrayal to shatter me completely, or I could harness the pain and transform it into a force for redemption. With trembling hands yet a resolute heart, I began the slow, arduous process of untangling the mess that had consumed our shared finances, determined to reclaim not only the money but also the pride and dignity that had been eroded by deceit. I remember the early shock so vividly, the feeling of the rug being pulled out from under me, the bitter taste of betrayal that seemed to saturate every corner of my existence. There were moments when I wondered if I had imagined the signs, if perhaps my longing for a perfect love had blinded me to the subtle clues. But conviction soon replaced doubt as the undeniable facts emerged from the shadows of ignorance. Robert's charming demeanor, once the very embodiment of trust, was now shrouded in a web of lies so intricate that unspooling it felt like a battle against an unseen enemy. Each fraudulent transfer, each hidden account, was a testament to his calculated betrayal, a betrayal that was measured in dollars and sealed with the cold precision of numbers on a ledger. In recounting these painful memories, I invite you, the listener, not merely to empathize with my plight but also to understand the transformative power of acknowledging the truth. The story I share is not just about the loss of nearly $1.8 million, it is about the undoing of a carefully crafted illusion and the courage it takes to confront the darkness within one's own life. It is a cautionary tale for anyone who might one day believe that love and money are immune to the corrupting lure of deceit. For I learned, through bitter experience, that financial security is only as solid as the trust upon which it is built, and that no amount of money can shield one's heart from the sting of betrayal. I stand before you now, still reeling from the wounds of that fateful discovery, yet bolstered by a renewed determination to transform my pain into purpose. That day, the day I uncovered the depth of Robert's deception, marked the beginning of a journey that would lead me to seek justice, to reclaim my dignity, and to rebuild a life on the unshakable rock of truth. In the quiet hours of countless nights, as I sat alone with my thoughts and the relentless patter of the rain, I began to slowly piece together the shattered fragments of a life that had once seemed so secure. I mapped out every transaction, every suspicious detail, letting the numbers speak the unvarnished truth of the betrayal that had unfolded before me. As I reflect upon those early moments of horror and disbelief, I feel the weight of every decision that followed. I made a silent vow to myself that I would no longer be a passive victim of deceit. The pain of losing not just our financial security but also the very essence of trust that had bound our relationship became the impetus for a resolve that I had not known I possessed. In those endless hours of isolation, enveloped by the sound of raindrops and the chilly whispers of a broken heart, the words of Psalm 46 verse 1 became a constant refrain in my mind. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble, I would murmur to myself, drawing strength from the promise that even in the midst of overwhelming despair, there remained a power that could restore, redeem, and heal. And so, as I now recount this introduction to my story, a story that is as much about the loss of a shared dream as it is about the dawning of a new, defiant hope, I invite you to journey with me through the corridors of memory and betrayal. Every detail, every whisper of a transfer, every sleepless night spent reconciling the numbers on our statements, speaks to a larger narrative of how one woman's life was turned upside down by the greed and dishonesty of someone she once trusted implicitly. The luxurious life we built together, symbolized by our $2.5 million nest egg and all the tangible dreams it represented, was nothing more than an illusion, a carefully constructed facade that crumbled under the weight of truth. In these moments of reflection, I realize now that my path was laid out before I even knew it, a path fraught with heartbreak, yet illuminated by the promise of redemption. I stand here, not as a broken soul, but as a woman reborn out of the ashes of betrayal, ready to face the future with courage and resolve. The journey that I now embark upon is one of reclaiming every lost piece of that shattered trust, of holding accountable the deception that cost me everything I held dear, and of ultimately discovering that even the deepest scars can give rise to a strength that is unyielding and profound. Every memory, every sorrowful night spent sorting through the remnants of our financial records, every tear shed over dreams lost forever, is now transformed into a testimony of resilience. I want you to know that even in our darkest moments, there is always a glimmer, an ember of hope, that reminds us we are not defined solely by our tragedies. I speak these words not only to document my personal ordeal but to serve as a beacon for anyone who might have ever questioned whether the pain of betrayal can ever give way to the promise of a new dawn. For I have learned that true strength lies in facing the most searing betrayals head-on, in using our anguish as the raw material from which we forge a future that is richer in wisdom and compassion. Tonight, I share my story with you, raw and unfiltered, as a solemn promise that while the past may cast long shadows, it will never extinguish the light of truth and redemption that burns within. I invite you to listen, to feel the weight of every word, and to understand that every whispered doubt and every unanswered question eventually led me to a place of extraordinary clarity, the moment when I decided that no one, no matter how deeply they had betrayed me, could ever rob me of my inherent worth. And as I utter these words, I hold tightly to that enduring promise from Psalm 46 verse 1, letting it infuse every fiber of my being with the strength to rebuild, to recover, and to eventually flourish once again. This is only the beginning of my story, a story that will soon unfold further into the twisting labyrinth of betrayal, strategy, and a quest for justice that transcends mere financial restitution. In the quiet solitude of this study, with only the steady cadence of rain to keep time, I retrace the steps of a journey that transformed my life irrevocably. I was once convinced that love could conquer all, but I have come to understand that truth, though painful, is the only true compass that can guide us out of even the darkest night. I now stand ready to peel away the layers of deception and expose the harsh reality of a life built on broken promises, a reality where every stolen dollar and every moment of betrayal paved the way for a renaissance of the soul. My voice, trembling yet resolute, declares that from the depths of financial ruin and shattered dreams can arise a power unlike any other, a power that restores dignity and reclaims hope. And so, as the storm outside subsides into a gentle drizzle, I take a deep breath, letting the words of Psalm 46 verse 1 echo in my mind, a constant reminder that even amidst overwhelming adversity, there is refuge, there is strength, and above all, there is a promise of renewal. This introduction is the first step on a path that I now choose to walk with unerring determination. The painful revelations of the past are no longer my chains but the very bricks with which I will build a future founded on authenticity and retribution. With every bead of sweat and every tear shed in the quiet of night, I have learned that the scars of betrayal do more than remind us of our losses, they propel us toward a destiny that honors our strength, our integrity, and our undeniable capacity to rise again. And so, let my story serve as both a warning and a guide, a testament to the fact that when darkness looms, the light of truth and faith can guide us to a brighter tomorrow. I share all of this with you in the hope that you, too, will realize that even when life seems to unravel and the very foundations of our dreams are shaken, there remains within us an inexhaustible reserve of courage. As I begin this long journey of recounting every twist of pain and every step toward recovery, I invite you to remember that every hardship carries with it the seed of transformation. In the final analysis, it is not the betrayal that defines us but the manner in which we choose to rise from its ashes, a choice that, for me, was irrevocably made on that stormy night when I discovered that nothing would ever be the same again. I still remember the first moment when the subtle tremors of suspicion began to shake the foundation of everything I thought I knew about our life together. It was a quiet Thursday evening when I sat at my desk, reviewing the monthly financial statements that had once filled me with pride, for our joint account had always been a testament to our shared dreams and dedication, proudly displaying a balance that had grown to $2,500,000 over the years of disciplined saving and careful planning, and yet that evening, as the rain gently tapped against the window, I noticed a small, almost imperceptible anomaly, a mysterious withdrawal of $50,000 marked only as miscellaneous expense that didn't belong to any of our planned expenditures, and in that fleeting moment a cold shiver ran down my spine, like an omen whispering warnings that I had long ignored. At first I rationalized it as a clerical error, perhaps a miscommunication between our bank's automated systems and our established budgeting routine, but as the days passed and I began to dig deeper into the details of our statements, it became impossible to dismiss the nagging feeling that something far more insidious was at work, for there was a pattern emerging beneath the surface, a series of minor discrepancies that, when pieced together, formed a mosaic of deception that I could no longer overlook. I started noticing that every few weeks there would be small, unaccounted transfers, some as minor as $5,000 and others spiking unexpectedly to $50,000 or more, each one slipping silently into obscure line items that, by themselves, might have seemed benign, yet cumulatively began to erode the stability of our finances. leaving me with an unsettling sense that every dollar had a hidden story of betrayal. I remember sitting up late into the night, the soft hum of the city in the background and the rhythmic tapping of rain as I pored over electronic statements and printed ledgers, my fingers tracing over rows of numbers that suddenly seemed to be arranged not in the familiar cadence of our joint prosperity, but in a discordant pattern that hinted at a scheme unfolding in the shadows. I would catch glimpses of Robert's routine that no longer matched the life we once shared, his late-night phone calls that lasted longer than necessary, whispers of conversations in tones that were no longer tender but guarded, and an increasing number of unexplained absences that left me alone with my thoughts and the growing suspicion that the man I had trusted with my heart and our future was slowly slipping away into a world of secrets, each small detail, once easily dismissed as the quirks of modern life, now intertwined to form an unsettling tapestry of dishonesty. I began to notice that the timing of these transfers was strangely consistent, occurring on days when Robert would return home late and claim exhaustion from work calls that stretched well into the early morning hours, and while I initially convinced myself that perhaps he was handling urgent matters beyond my understanding, my financial records told a different story, a story where the money was vanishing not into investments we had agreed upon, but into accounts and entities that I had never heard of before, accounts that belonged to names that sounded foreign and unconnected to our life together, and that realization slowly gnawed at the edges of my trust, turning it into a fragile barrier that strained to hold back a storm of betrayal. I would sit at that desk, heart pounding and mind racing, as I meticulously documented each irregularity, every date, every amount, every cryptic entry in the ledger, and with each detail I recorded, the magnitude of my growing suspicion became more undeniable, as if the numbers themselves were pleading for acknowledgement of the truth. The gentle glow of the desk lamp illuminated my hesitant scribbles in my battered planner, a silent testimony to the nightmarish process of uncovering what I had once thought impossible, and as the clock ticked relentlessly in the background, the cumulative effect of these anomalies began to form a damning chronology of behavior that suggested more than mere human error. I recall one particularly chilling night when, after comparing bank statements for the past 3 months, I discovered not one but several consecutive transfers that added up to nearly $150,000 in discrepancies over a single month, and the realization that these sums, though initially seeming trivial when taken individually, were part of a deliberate and precisely orchestrated pattern of diversion, shook me to the core, forcing me to confront a reality that I had been too frightened to accept. The man I loved was redirecting funds away from the security we had built together, funds that were meant to secure our future and honor the commitments we had made to each other. In that vulnerable moment, as the rain continued its ceaseless serenade against the window and the soft lights of the city flickered in the distance, I felt a profound isolation that was unlike any loneliness I had ever experienced, for it was not merely the absence of companionship but the crushing absence of trust, the kind that underpins every promise and every shared dream, and I realized that the first signs of betrayal were not explosive declarations or dramatic confrontations, but rather the quiet, insidious erosion of something sacred, unnoticed until it had already taken root. Every carefully scheduled deposit, every calculated withdrawal, now carried the weight of a secret I was desperate to decipher, and with every hesitant keystroke as I logged these anomalies, I felt an ominous certainty that the cracks in our marriage were not accidents of fate but deliberate fissures crafted over time. The more I delved into the minutiae of our financial records, the more I felt as if I were deciphering an encrypted message meant solely for those with the key to hidden treachery, and the numbers began to speak to me in whispers of betrayal, urging me to pay attention to the details I had long dismissed as insignificant, in the warm, enveloping quiet of that study, where each beep of a phone notification and every rustle of paper became a stark reminder of the life I once cherished. I found myself caught in a relentless quest for answers, questioning each irregularity and fearing the implications of what might lie beneath the surface, as the cumulative effect of these small transgressions painted a portrait of transgression so precise that even my tentative heart could no longer deny the truth that was slowly emerging. In those harrowing moments, the financial records transformed from mere statements of dollars and cents into a narrative of betrayal, each line entry and digital timestamp serving as a testament to a hidden agenda that was erasing our shared legacy piece by piece, and I felt a growing desperation, coupled with an overwhelming need to protect not only our dwindling financial security but also the fragile remnants of the trust one once held dear. I began to question every late-night conversation, every unexplained expense, and every time Robert's eyes averted mine when I mentioned a peculiar charge on our statement, a silent communication of guilt that needed no words to be understood. And though fear threatened to paralyze me, the clarity of the evidence compelled me to document every infraction meticulously, knowing that if I ever wished to reclaim my life from the shadows of deceit, I would need to have every detail recorded for the judgment that was yet to come. As I sat there, with rain melting the window panes into streaks of sorrow and anger, my mind reeled with the implications of what I was uncovering, a slow-burning inferno of betrayal that had been carefully smoldering under the guise of normalcy until it now demanded to be confronted, and the realization struck me that the first signs of this deception, slight and easily dismissed in their infancy, were in fact the initial brush-strokes of a portrait of duplicity so vast that it could shatter the illusion of our once invincible life together. Every minute detail began to coalesce into a narrative of betrayal that was as inevitable as the coming dawn, and with each new discovery, the veneer of our shared dreams peeled away to reveal a reality of calculated lies and secret maneuvers. It was in that moment that I knew I had reached the precipice of a decision that would change everything, that the delicate balance of our financial legacy and emotional faith had been irrevocably disturbed by the subtle but unmistakable indicators of Robert's hidden duplicity. Now, as I continue to share these first alarming signals of doubt with you, I can almost hear the steady patter of rain reminding me that even the gentlest of disturbances can herald a raging storm, and that the courage to face these early warnings is the first step toward reclaiming a life that has been slowly eroded by the neglect of trust. In the quiet solitude of that study, beneath the soft glow of a vintage lamp and the relentless rhythm of raindrops, I vowed to follow the trail of these numbers and shadows, not only as an act of self-preservation but as the beginning of a journey toward reasserting my dignity and righting the wrongs inflicted upon our shared life, a journey that, as painful as it was, lit the way to the painful yet necessary confrontation that lay ahead. I remember that night as if it were etched in every shadow and every dim beam of light that filtered into the study. I had already been immersed in my routine of reconciling our monthly financial statements when a series of anomalies began to reveal themselves on the screen before me, and slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the horrifying truth started to emerge. There I was, sitting alone with nothing but the steady patter of rain and the soft glow of my laptop as my only companions, when I noticed that the neat rows of numbers, each representing months of careful planning that had contributed to our once steadfast $2,500,000 joint account, began to tell a story I never wanted to hear. It was then that I discovered, amidst the countless data points I had grown so accustomed to, a disquieting series of unauthorized transfers, meticulously scheduled and concealed under the guise of miscellaneous expenses. A once dismissible line item now stood out with a startling withdrawal of $50,000 that made my heart skip a beat, and as I leaned closer, my fingers trembling over the keys, it became apparent that this singular figure was not an isolated error but rather a fragment of a much larger, more insidious scheme. I began to comb through transaction after transaction, my eyes straining against the dim light as I compared our digital records to our paper statements, each discrepancy building layer upon layer of evidence that seemed too deliberate to be accidental. My pulse quickened with every new revelation, multiple transfers totaling, I soon realized with mounting dread, nearly $1,800,000 had been siphoned out over the past 12 months. I stared in disbelief at the digital ledger, each column filled with dates, amounts, and vague descriptions that, upon first glance, might have seemed ordinary. Yet, as I methodically cross-referenced the figures, it became clear that these withdrawals were directed to accounts that were unlisted on our approved investment plan, to names that I had never encountered during our routine financial reviews. My eyes raced over the figures as I pulled up emails that had once been innocuous memos about routine business decisions. There were now threads that hinted at clandestine meetings and coded conversations, messages exchanged with a sharp, almost clinical detachment that was entirely at odds with the loving assurances I had once received from Robert. Each email and every annotation in my digital journal gave voice to a betrayal that was coldly calculated. Every unauthorized transfer was a stroke in a painting of deceit, meticulously executed so as to divert our hard-earned resources into a labyrinth of offshore accounts and secret investments. It was as though I had stumbled upon a hidden chapter in our shared life, an appendix of lies that no one should ever have to face. As I sat there, books and papers scattered around, the reality of the situation began to sink in. It wasn't merely that money was missing, it was that our entire financial future, built on years of joint sacrifice and endless nights of planning, was now at risk, eroded by decisions that I had never consented to. I recalled the countless evenings when Robert and I had sat side by side, poring over our budgets and mapping out our dreams, never suspecting that behind every optimistic projection lay the seeds of a betrayal so profound that it threatened to collapse the very foundation of our trust. Now, with the evidence glaring in front of me, every number was a confirmation that the life I had known was built on a lie. I could feel it in my bones, the deep tremor of disillusionment growing with every unchecked decimal and unexplained transfer, the shock of discovering that someone I had vowed to share every joy, every challenge with, had been leading a double life. The evidence was undeniable. I had compiled screenshots of each dubious transaction, detailed every irregularity in an ever-growing spreadsheet, and printed out bank statements that chronicled the systematic theft of our future. The sheer scale of the deception slashed through the remnants of hope I had clung to for so long. I vividly recall the moment when I totaled the figures, the cumulative sum of nearly $1,800,000, and felt a paralyzing mix of grief and anger that threatened to overwhelm me. That number was no longer an abstract figure, it was a personification of every broken promise and every silent lie. It was the embodiment of a betrayal that dismantled not only my financial security but also the core of what I had believed to be an unbreakable bond. I sifted through the records with a sense of urgency, each click and scroll underscoring the cold precision of the deception. There were patterns that I could no longer ignore: transfers made on nights when Robert claimed to be working late, deposits redirected immediately into shadowy accounts listed under names that sounded foreign and untraceable, and transactions timed perfectly to avoid any immediate scrutiny. It was as if a hidden hand had been meticulously orchestrating these moves, erasing any trace of accountability. I felt a growing determination to document every detail, to capture every anomaly as a testament to the truth that was too painful to ignore. In that moment of ruthless clarity, I realized that I had stumbled upon a conspiracy that extended far beyond a simple marital indiscretion. It was an elaborate betrayal, encoded in the language of numbers and silent transactions. My mind raced as I tried to piece together the puzzle, the realization that every late-night call, every hushed conversation between Robert and unfamiliar contacts, now took on a sinister clarity in light of the evidence spilling before me. I recalled evenings when his eyes would shift ever so briefly whenever I glanced at our financial documents, a silent confession that there were truths he desperately wished to conceal. The digital records told their own story, a narrative of trust slowly eroded by calculated moves. Every spreadsheet I generated, every email I recovered from backup folders on my computer, confirmed that this was no random error or fleeting oversight. This was a deliberate, systematic diversion of funds intended to secure a secret life, the full extent of which I was only beginning to comprehend. The discovery was both a devastating blow and a catalyst that awakened within me a fierce desire for accountability. I spent hours in that quiet study, rereading the emails, rechecking the bank statements, and consolidating every piece of evidence into a single, damning dossier. The horrifying clarity of the situation began to crystallize as I meticulously noted down each suspicious transaction with trembling hands. Each data point was a thread in the tapestry of Robert's hidden deception. I vividly remember the sinking feeling as I compiled a report that ultimately showed not just isolated errors, but a coherent timeline marking the steady erosion of our joint fortune. There was an undeniable streak of cold intent behind every transaction, each one revealing that our carefully nurtured trust had been exploited for financial gain. At that moment, I recognized the magnitude of the betrayal and the implications it held for my future. I had always believed that numbers were objective, impartial witnesses to our lives, yet now, they spoke with the voice of treachery and warned me of a danger that was both personal and profound. The shock of realizing that the very bedrock of our shared dreams was being undermined by covert financial maneuvers was almost too much to bear. I felt the weight of the truth settling in my heart as I repeatedly stared at the monstrous total, $1,800,000 siphoned away into the abyss of secret accounts and dubious investments. The recovery of that money now seemed not only a matter of restoring financial security but of reclaiming every ounce of trust and dignity that had been stolen from me. In the silent hours of that long night, every document, every digital record became a voice crying out for justice. I knew that this discovery was irreversible and that confronting the full extent of Robert's betrayal would compel me to take actions that would forever alter the course of my life. I printed out the evidence, gathered every file and screenshot, and began to piece together the narrative of that fateful year, the timeline of deceit that spanned from one seemingly innocuous transaction to the next, building into a staggering revelation of calculated fraud. Every nuance, every detail was now recorded in the cold light of truth, and with each passing moment, the picture became clearer and more damning, a mirror reflecting the reality I had long refused to accept. It was in that solitude, surrounded by the tangible proof of a love turned treacherous, that the time came for me to make a decision to no longer allow myself to be a passive victim in a game where my future was being bartered away in silence. The discovery was the moment of awakening I had dreaded yet subconsciously anticipated, a cruel pivot point where the whispers of betrayal transformed into a roar demanding retribution. I felt an inner resolve hardening within me as I acknowledged that nothing would ever restore the past, but the path forward lay in facing this deception head-on and in assembling every shred of evidence into a weapon of truth. Now, as I stand in the aftermath of that shattering discovery, I am left with the undeniable knowledge that the run of secret transactions had left an indelible scar on every promise we once made. I could see the numbers, cold and uncompromising on the screen before me, as if they carried the weight of every broken oath and every silent night of unspoken despair. The meticulous nature of the fraud was as brilliant as it was heartless, a deliberate manipulation of trust that had transformed our shared dreams into a ledger of loss. With each keystroke and every printed page, I was piecing together the evidence of a betrayal that had quietly undermined the very foundation of our life together. That night, in the quiet sanctuary of my study, illuminated only by the soft glow of my computer and the relentless rhythm of the rain, I made a vow. A vow not only to reclaim what had been unlawfully taken but also to uncover the entire truth behind the deception that had forced me into this painful journey. With the evidence laid bare before me, I understood that the discovery was a turning point, a moment that would set into motion a relentless quest for justice, the kind that would eventually dismantle the carefully constructed facade of false promises and restore the dignity that had been so carelessly relinquished. In that charged silence, as my eyes absorbed the final figures on the screen and my heart pounded with a mix of sorrow, fury, and determination, I realized that this discovery was more than a financial reckoning, it was the beginning of a crusade. A crusade to hold accountable the very man I had once loved, and to reclaim not just the money that had been stolen, but the very essence of my trust, my integrity, and my life. The undeniable evidence that lay before me was a call to arms, compelling me to step beyond the threshold of grief and into the light of retribution, a journey that would demand every ounce of strength I possessed and transform a painful truth into the catalyst for a new beginning. I remember the moment I decided that I would no longer be the victim of this calculated betrayal, the weight of every stolen dollar, every manipulated transaction, and every lie that had slowly eaten away at our life together left me with only one clear choice: to take action and reclaim what was rightfully mine. It was not an impulsive decision, but a cold, deliberate determination forged from the painful clarity of knowing that nearly $1,800,000 had been siphoned from our joint account, a sum that was more than just numbers. It was our future, our shared dreams, and my very sense of security. As I sat in the dim light of my study, with rain drumming softly on the windowpane and casting ghostly patterns across the documents before me, I began to craft a plan, a meticulously calculated plan of revenge that was designed not only to expose Robert's treachery but also to ensure that every carefully concealed deception was laid bare for the world to see. I started by reaching out to those who possessed the expertise I sorely needed in order to dismantle the intricate web of his financial fraud. The first call was made to Dr. Emily Hart, a renowned financial forensics expert whose name had become synonymous with uncovering deep-seated fraud in high-stakes cases. I recall dialing her number with trembling hands yet a steely resolve, knowing that this was the first step toward transforming my anguish into undeniable evidence. Dr. Hart's reputation for relentless precision in analyzing financial records made her the ideal ally. She promised to scrutinize every line on our bank statements, every irregular transfer, and every shadowy deposit that had been so artfully hidden. With her guidance, I prepared secure digital folders containing encrypted screenshots, detailed spreadsheets, and documentation of each unauthorized transfer. Every anomaly, such as the recurring mysterious deductions that started innocuously at $50,000 and then accumulated incrementally to amounts that, in total, amounted to nearly $1,800,000 over the past year, was meticulously catalogued and cross-referenced. Simultaneously, I enlisted the expertise of John Anderson, a seasoned attorney known for his uncompromising approach to cases of white-collar and financial fraud. John was the kind of lawyer who thrived on bringing truth to light, and his calm, methodical demeanor provided a counterbalance to the emotional turmoil that had plagued me since discovering Robert's duplicity. I met with him in a confidential setting, a discreet conference room off the main floor of a respected firm, where I laid out the stark evidence I had unearthed. Together, we crafted a legal strategy that would ensure every piece of financial misappropriation was rendered irrefutable in court. The plan was not just to recover our lost fortune, but to dismantle the elaborate network of deceit that Robert had constructed, a network involving offshore accounts set up under dubious corporate names and transactions that traced back to shell entities deliberately designed to obscure his involvement. In the days that followed, I arranged a series of clandestine meetings with both Dr. Hart and John, during which we pored over data, rechecked bank statements, and decrypted emails that had, until that very moment, been nothing more than cryptic messages exchanged between Robert and his undisclosed associate, his elusive mistress, whose identity remained shrouded in mystery. Every meeting was conducted away from prying eyes, in rented conference rooms and secure, password-protected online calls, with our communications encrypted to prevent any leak of sensitive information. I spared no expense, allocating part of the remaining funds to ensure that every forensic analysis, every legal consultation, was carried out with the highest degree of security. The cost was steep, but the price of inaction was far greater. I remember the grim determination that enveloped me during one particularly cold morning when, accompanied by Dr. Hart, I visited the bank. In a quiet, unassuming office, we went through pages upon pages of account statements that bore the ledger of our disintegrating trust. There, amidst columns of figures and dates, lay the undeniable proof of Robert's betrayal. I watched as Dr. Hart methodically highlighted transactions, each one a clandestine entry in the record of our collective dreams, pieces of evidence that, when combined, painted a portrait of calculated greed and deception. That moment crystallized for me the resolve to move forward with unwavering certainty. The blueprint of my revenge was complex and required absolute precision. I created a detailed timeline that mapped every suspicious transfer to corresponding dates and events, linking them to Robert's unexplained absences and his late-night phone calls. I even set up a secure backup server where all evidence was automatically saved, ensuring that no tampering could undermine the case we were building. Every email, every scanned document, and every recorded conversation was archived with timestamps and digital signatures. I initiated a series of discreet and relentless background checks, hiring private investigators to track down any additional associates who might have been part of this grand deception. All these steps, executed with both clinical detachment and raw emotion, served as the foundation of my master plan of retribution. I then moved to the next phase of the plan, assembling a comprehensive dossier that would serve not only as the cornerstone of our legal case but also as a public testament to the betrayal that had upended my life. I compiled a 300-page document, complete with annotated screenshots, annotated bank transactions, and intercepted communications, that detailed every nuance of the financial manipulation. I annotated each entry with my own reflections, highlighting the moments when each piece of evidence had shattered the illusion of the secure life I once believed in. My intention was not merely to seek restitution, but to send a message, that deception, no matter how well concealed, would eventually be exposed, and that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt only on the foundation of truth. Every step of the plan was executed with the precision of a military operation. I set up covert meetings with Dr. Hart and John Anderson at odd hours, sometimes in the dead of night, when the world outside was asleep and vulnerable. We spoke in hushed tones, our voices barely audible over the sound of rain and distant traffic, as we refined our strategy and anticipated potential countermeasures. I took extra precautions by using burner phones and secure messaging apps to communicate, understanding that the stakes were too high to allow even a single breach of confidentiality. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was not just a personal vendetta, it was a fight for justice, a stand against the profound betrayal that had turned my world upside down. As I reflect on those intense, strategy-filled days, I recall the mixture of fear and empowerment that surged through me with every new piece of evidence and every meeting held in secret. I began to feel that the power of precision and accountability could, in fact, restore not only my finances but also my faith in justice. The intricacy of the plan gave me solace. Every step was deliberate, every decision calculated to ensure that Robert's intricate network of lies would crumble under the weight of undeniable proof. I relived the memory of one particular meeting with John Anderson, where, over cups of bitter coffee in a shadowed corner of a downtown meeting room, we mapped out the entire sequence of events on a whiteboard. His pen moved confidently as he connected the dots, his voice steady as he explained how each illicit transfer would stand as an irrefutable exhibit in court. His words resonated deeply within me, affirming that while my heart had been shattered, my resolve was stronger than ever. The plan extended beyond the legal realm. I knew that in order to truly dismantle the facade Robert had created, I needed to prepare for a public reckoning. I began drafting a detailed account of my journey, not merely as a memoir of betrayal but as a blueprint for anyone who might one day find themselves ensnared in a similarly treacherous web. I envisioned speaking at conferences, sharing my story in interviews, and even mentoring others to safeguard their own financial well-being. This multi-layered approach to my revenge would serve as both my personal catharsis and a beacon of truth for others hurt by deceit. I recall the final moments before I sent the complete dossier to John Anderson and Dr. Hart, a moment when every ounce of my anger was channeled into a calm determination. My hands, still steady despite the tumult within, clicked the send button on an encrypted email that carried within it the accumulated evidence of months of painstaking research. That act, simple yet monumental, marked the true beginning of my journey to reclaim my life. In that instant, I was no longer merely a betrayed wife. I had become a warrior armed with facts, supported by experts, and unwavering in my pursuit of justice. With every secure file saved, every meeting meticulously recorded, and every precaution taken against potential sabotage, my plan of revenge transformed from an abstract concept into a concrete strategy. It was a plan born out of heartbreak but refined by intellect, a plan that promised not just retribution, but the restoration of dignity, honor, and trust in a life that had been so deeply undermined. In the quiet hours, surrounded by the cold steel of evidence and the soft hum of my secure devices, I vowed that this plan would not only dismantle the financial empire built on deceit but would also catalyze my transformation from a victim to an empowered survivor. Every detail, every figure, every carefully orchestrated maneuver in this plan became my tool for dismantling a legacy of lies that Robert had constructed. And as I sat back and reviewed the maps of financial routes, the flowcharts interlacing fraudulent transfers with moments of betrayal, I knew that this was not an end but the beginning of my fight, a fight that would reclaim not only the money stolen from me but also the sanctity of a life that I had once believed was unassailable. The blueprint I had created was both my shield and my sword, and with it, I was ready to confront a future that might be uncertain, yet was now undeniably mine to shape. The moment of reckoning arrived unexpectedly yet inexorably, as if the universe had been waiting for all the carefully hidden secrets to finally surface. No longer willing to suffer in silence, I resolved to confront Robert in a way that would shatter any remaining illusions of a flawless union. Standing in that modern living space, where every detail had already whispered of past harmony, I looked at him with a steely calm that belied the storm raging inside me. The air became thick with tension as I presented the undeniable evidence of nearly $1,800,000 siphoned away from what we once believed was our secure future. My collation of printed screenshots, annotated bank statements, and expert analyses from Dr. Emily Hart lay spread out before us, each piece a silent yet potent testament to his duplicity. Without preamble and with absolute clarity, I spoke, "Robert, everything you've tried to hide is laid bare right here tonight." My voice, firm and resolute, echoed off the pristine walls as I recounted each fraudulent transfer, from the inexplicable withdrawal of $50,000 to the intricate series of covert transactions that, together, robbed us of our collective dreams. His expression, initially a mask of confusion, slowly crumbled under the weight of the revelations. I could sense his mind scrambling for words, but no excuse or plea could defy the cold calculus of the evidence before him. Each document, every digital timestamp, was a nail in the coffin of his carefully constructed facade, and I let that truth reverberate in the charged silence between us. Every fiber of my being was lit with unyielding determination as I advanced further into the confrontation. I detailed the timeline with unrelenting precision, explaining how each suspicious charge corresponded with his unexplained absences and secretive late-night calls. As I slid forward the compiled dossier, which I had painstakingly assembled over countless sleepless nights, I watched him shift uncomfortably, his eyes darting between the pages that chronicled every act of betrayal. The room, already imbued with stark modernity, witnessed a collision of raw emotion and meticulously documented proof that could no longer be denied. Even as thunder rattled against the windows, I pressed on without a hint of hesitation, my words slicing through the remnants of feigned innocence. "Every cent, every transfer unmistakably points back to a web of deceit," I declared, my tone growing steadier with each sentence. The figures that once had been abstract numbers in a safe account now transformed into symbols of shattered promises and the loss of trust we had built together. I recounted the precise moments when the digital evidence had first shattered the illusion of our shared future and how I had silently vowed to reclaim every stolen dream. The evidence was conclusive, a financial labyrinth designed to misappropriate our hard-earned savings, and I laid each piece out as a testament to Robert's betrayal. Across from me, Robert's defenses began to falter as the stark reality of the moment took hold. His attempt at stammered justifications dissolved into silence when confronted with every meticulously verified detail. I noted the slight tremor in his voice, the subtle shifts in his posture, and the way his eyes betrayed his internal struggle. For me, these were the unspoken acknowledgments of guilt, the unmistakable signs that he knew deep down there was no salvaging the truth. I felt neither vindictive cruelty nor a desire for needless retribution, only a steadfast resolve to expose the lies that had undermined everything we had once trusted was enough to fuel every word. In a measured cadence, I recalled the countless evenings spent in isolation, poring over financial ledgers and encrypted emails, assembling a case that was now irrefutable. Robert, this isn't just about money, it's about the very sanctity of the vows we made. I will no longer allow deception to define our lives, I asserted, my tone imbued with the gravity of hard-fought battles. The documents before us, the product of relentless inquiry and sleepless nights, demanded acknowledgement, and tonight they would no longer be hidden behind half-truths. There was no turning back, the evidence had spoken loudly enough that any attempt at denial would only deepen the chasm between us. As I spoke, the room seemed to narrow, the ambient light focusing on the stark tableau of our broken reality. Every word, every phrase, was a step along a bridge from past despair to the promise of reclaiming my dignity and security. The confrontation was no mere verbal exchange, it was a pivotal moment where the accumulated weight of deceit was lifted and the full magnitude of betrayal was confronted head-on. I laid bare not only the facts but the deep personal hurt incurred by a love turned cold by ambition and greed. The storm outside intensified, its relentless drumming mirroring the rapid beat of my heart as I repeated to him the undeniable truth, determined that no further lies would find refuge in our shared history. Time seemed to suspend as I awaited his response, the silence in the room punctuated only by the low rumble of distant thunder. Every fraction of his measured breaths and every second that passed was a silent admission, a confession conveyed through evasive glances and palpable discomfort. I pressed forward, making it clear that this moment was the culmination of all the sacrifices and sleepless nights, it was the moment when accountability demanded a reckoning. There was no room for further ambiguity, only the stark reality that every secret narrative had been unraveled and there could be no hiding from the consequences. In that charged instant, as I observed the crumbling veneer of his defenses, I knew the path ahead would be fraught with further battles. Yet, as I surveyed the evidence and the raw anguish in my own eyes, a surge of invincible clarity washed over me. I was no longer the woman who had once silently hoped for reconciliation amid whispers of doubt, I had become an agent of truth, resolute in my mission to restore my life to a place of honor, dignity, and transparency. The confrontation had transformed from a moment of personal anguish to a declaration of intent, a promise that deception, no matter how intricately woven, would never again be allowed to dictate the course of my future. In that transformative exchange, with the tempest outside echoing the dynamics within, I left no question that the era of hidden betrayals was over. The evidence, the numbers, and the very quiet rage that filled the room bore witness to a turning point, one that inaugurated a battle for justice that would reverberate far beyond these walls. The confrontation was not the end but the beginning of a journey where accountability, truth, and resilience would guide me toward rebuilding not only what had been stolen but also every piece of shattered trust. Stepping into this solemn courtroom felt like crossing a threshold, one where every nerve within me resonated with the weight of months of suffering, determination, and hope for vindication. I walked slowly to my designated seat with John Anderson, my steadfast attorney, by my side. Today was not simply about numbers or legal technicalities, it was about unveiling a hidden betrayal that had methodically drained nearly $1,800,000 from our once promising future. The evidence I had painstakingly gathered, meticulously compiled documents, electronic records, and expert analyses, stood as a silent proclamation that protest would no longer be deferred. As proceedings began, the judge's commanding presence set the tone. With her measured voice inviting order, the courtroom fell into a concentrated hush. I watched as the first exhibits were introduced, a series of meticulously labeled bank statements, each page chronicling transactions that betrayed our shared vision of financial security. My pulse quickened at the sight of the evidence, the $50,000 withdrawals marked as miscellaneous expenses that cascaded into a disturbing pattern. Every figure on those pages was a scar etched into our dream, a dream that had been carelessly undermined by deceit. Then came the testimony of Dr. Emily Hart, an expert in financial forensics whose calm, clinical analysis left no room for doubt. With precision and clarity, she explained how each unauthorized transaction, when connected in a timeline, revealed a sophisticated scheme designed to siphon off our funds into offshore accounts. Her words built an unassailable case, each line item, every obscure transfer, pointed relentlessly toward deliberate malfeasance. As I listened, I sensed both the room's collective awareness and the silent judgment that underscored our shared disbelief. The tension escalated during cross-examination. John Anderson, armed with incisive questions, challenged every assertion made by Robert, my former partner. The air seemed to thicken as he navigated the maze of financial data with unwavering focus. Each query reflected not simply an attack on the numbers, but a probing of the very soul behind them. Robert's responses, once smooth and rehearsed, began to fray under the pressure. With each inconsistency exposed, his veneer of confidence crumbled, revealing a man entangled in his own web of lies. The jurors' eyes, initially weary spectators, now flitted with a mixture of astonishment and quiet empathy for my plight. I remember the moment when my turn to testify arrived, a moment that altered the very cadence of my life. Standing in that courtroom, my voice steadied by the firm belief in the truth I carried, I recounted every harrowing detail, the countless nights spent deciphering our financial records, the sinking realization that our joint account had been systematically drained, and the brutal discovery that the very numbers we once celebrated were nothing more than instruments of a cold, calculated betrayal. Each word was soaked in the raw pain of abandonment and the burning resolve to reclaim what had been stolen, not just money, but the very dignity that had once defined my trust. My narrative, undeniably personal, was supported by tangible evidence, digital snapshots replete with timestamps, certified copies of bank logs, and even intercepted emails that corroborated every technical detail of the fraud. As I laid out the evidence on the stand, the atmosphere shifted. It was as if each piece of proof illuminated an inescapable truth. The meticulously organized dossier, weighing as heavily as the burden of my loss, transformed the courtroom into a stage of revelation. The judge's eyes flickered knowingly with each new discovery, and even the seasoned jurors could no longer ignore the compelling trail of deception. The data was irrefutable, every transfer, every coded memo, and every unauthorized withdrawal amounted to a sum that not only represented financial loss but also symbolized the destruction of trust. I detailed how my investigations had linked Robert's nighttime absences and evasive phone calls to these clandestine transactions, and with every fact laid bare, it became increasingly clear that our shared future had been dismantled piece by painful piece. In a crescendo of legal discourse, John Anderson succinctly connected the dots with a powerful, visual timeline. With a confident sweep over the evidence, he illustrated how a series of seemingly unrelated transactions formed a coherent narrative of fraud and betrayal. The stark photography of numbers and dates fell like dominoes, unrelenting and irrefutable, in their demand for accountability. There was a moment when the courtroom grew so quiet you could almost hear the individual gasps of realization from the gallery, each one an acknowledgement that the facade had been shattered and that justice was within reach. Then came the climactic moment. The jury, having fortified their decision with the weight of all the evidence, delivered their verdict. When the foreperson's voice finally broke the oppressive silence to announce the court's decision, in favor of restoring not only the lost $1,800,000 but also awarding additional compensatory damages for emotional distress, a surge of cathartic relief washed over me. In that split second, as the gavel struck a decisive note and the judge's final words resonated throughout the chamber, every painful memory was met with a promise of redemption. Realizing that this courtroom battle was not merely the conclusion of a legal procedure, but rather the reclamation of my life and the restoration of my self-respect, I felt an indomitable strength rising from the depths of despair. Every meticulous hour spent gathering evidence, every sleepless night fueled by doubt and determination, culminated in this singular moment of vindication. The courtroom, with its cold, unyielding walls and solemn decorum, had become the crucible in which truth was purified and the forces of deception were finally vanquished. I observed the solemn nods from the legal experts, the respectful shuffles among the jurors, and even caught a fleeting glance of remorse on Robert's face as he sat isolated and defeated, a stark contrast to the confident demeanor he once displayed. Leaving the courtroom after that definitive pronouncement, I was consumed by a strange mixture of sorrow and empowerment. I recognized that while the battle had been fiercely fought and hard won, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where the scars of betrayal would serve as emblems of my resilience rather than as chains of despair. The victory in that courthouse was not just about the financial restitution, it was a bold declaration that no amount of calculated deception could forever silence the call for accountability. Every piece of evidence, every testimony, had reaffirmed that the very essence of our humanity and trust is inviolable, a truth that can transform even the most devastating setbacks into the driving force for renewal. In that hallowed hall of justice, amid the echoes of a final gavel strike, I found not just legal triumph but a profound personal rebirth. The meticulous pursuit of truth had culminated in this day of reckoning, a day when every dollar misappropriated, every betrayal meticulously chronicled, was righted by the unwavering force of the law. And as I gathered my documents and prepared to step back into the world beyond those storied walls, I carried with me the knowledge that the battle in court had restored something invaluable, a reaffirmation that truth, however obscured by the shadows of betrayal, will always find its way to the light. Standing in this haven of gentle light, my heart begins to settle after the turbulent chapters of deceit and loss, and I realize that every painful moment has been a stepping stone toward unveiling the true strength hidden within me. Emerging from a whirlwind of heartache and a staggering financial betrayal amounting to nearly $1,800,000, I have reached a turning point where I can finally embrace the wisdom gleaned from every tear and every sleepless night. The journey wasn't merely about uncovering hidden transactions or confronting the lies of someone I once held dear. It was about rediscovering myself, understanding that even in the darkest hour, there is a spark that can ignite a new beginning. In the stillness of this morning, as the first light dances across the polished floor and the aroma of blooming flowers fills the air, I reflect deeply on the lessons that life has etched into my soul. I have learned that betrayal, no matter how excruciating, is not a dead end but rather a transformative force capable of reshaping one's future. Every calculated fraud and every unauthorized withdrawal from our once secure account were painful reminders of what I had lost, a future built on trust and shared dreams, and yet, they became the catalyst for a profound inner awakening. I count these harsh truths as invaluable lessons, teaching me that resilience is forged not in the absence of hardship, but in the very crucible of suffering. I now understand that while I once measured my worth and security in numbers, true wealth lies in our capacity to learn, forgive, and rebuild. The enormous financial blow that robbed me of $1,800,000 could have left me broken, yet here I stand, not defined by those losses, but shaped by the persistence to rise above them. I recall the days when shadows of doubt and betrayal weighed on every facet of my existence, when every unauthorized transaction was a painful reminder of trust misdirected. Yet, amid that darkness, I clung to a simple, unwavering truth, a verse from Psalm 46 verse 1 that has since become my guiding light: God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Those words resounded like a promise, urging me to seek refuge in the unyielding strength of faith and to trust that every end is also the seed of a new beginning. In this transformative chapter, I have come to see that redemption is not a destination but rather an ongoing process, a journey of healing that requires both grace and tenacity. I let go of the weight of what once was and choose instead to focus on the lessons that pain has imparted. Every sleepless night spent poring over financial records, each moment of dread at the discovery of concealed sums, has taught me that the true measure of success is not the absence of pitfalls, but the courage to rise after every fall. I learned that deceit, no matter how meticulously crafted, cannot hold back the surge of truth when met with determination and informed action. The journey toward healing involved not only confronting the figures on bank statements or the cold reality of legal battles but also a fundamental reshaping of my inner world. In the quiet solitude of my new sanctuary, I have begun to pen a fresh chapter, one where I reclaim my identity and rebuild my life on a foundation of genuine trust, first in others, then in myself. The scars that once marred my spirit are now transforming into symbols of a hard-earned resilience. They whisper of a past filled with harsh lessons, yet also of a future bright with promise, a future where I am no longer the victim of betrayal, but a survivor empowered by truth and fortified by experience. Reflecting on the cascade of events that led me here, I realize that every obstacle encountered in that long, dark period ultimately paved the way for a clearer understanding of my own strength and worth. The path was arduous, from the initial shock of discovering unauthorized withdrawals, to the painstaking documentation of every discrepancy, to the decisive confrontation in the courtroom where justice was finally served. Each moment, each phase of the struggle, was a necessary prelude to a renewed sense of self, one that no longer finds its value in wealth alone but in the enduring power of spirit and conviction. Today, as I stand amidst the soft embrace of morning light and the serene whispers of nature reaffirming life anew, I feel a profound gratitude for the adversities I once endured. They have granted me the clarity to appreciate that every ending harbors the possibility of a new beginning, and every shattered piece of trust can be reassembled into a mosaic of strength and hope. I have learned that while the echoes of past betrayals may linger, they do not have the final say. The narrative of my life is mine to rewrite, with every chapter colored by both the pain of memory and the brilliance of rebirth. In this renewed state of being, I look forward to a future unburdened by the shadows of what was, embracing instead the vibrant potential of what is yet to come. I have resolved to channel my experiences into a force for good, to share my story with others so that they, too, might realize that even when life seems irreparably fractured, there lies within each of us the power to overcome and transform adversity into opportunity. I now dedicate my days to not only rebuilding my financial security and personal stability but also to mentoring others who have faced similar trials, guiding them through the labyrinth of recovery with the same relentless hope that carried me through my darkest moments. With each beat of my heart, I celebrate the strength that arose from despair and the moments of clarity that illuminated a path forward. My journey is not defined by the betrayal I suffered, but by the comeback that followed, a testament to the unyielding belief that even in the face of overwhelming deceit, light inevitably breaks through the darkness. As I step into this bright new chapter, the memories of loss are tempered by the sweet promise of renewal, and I stand ready to embrace every possibility that tomorrow has to offer. Above all, my final lesson is this: life does not end with our greatest losses but rather evolves into a canvas of infinite opportunity, waiting for us to paint our most authentic, resilient selves. I take with me the enduring assurance that our trials refine us, that our wounds become the very source of our strength, and that from the ruins of inflicted pain, we can build something immeasurably beautiful. And so, with heart open and spirit unbound, I embark on this new beginning, guided always by the light of truth, the healing balm of forgiveness, and the steadfast promise of a future defined not by what was lost, but by everything that is yet to be discovered.